Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an excellent game to share with you from round 1 of the 2025 Tata Steel Masters. On the white end, Praggnanandhaa, playing against Nodirbek Abdusattorov. Alright, on board we have an English opening. Bishop b4 is the Kramnik-Shirov Counterattack. Knight posts up in the center, hits the bishop, it's supported. We don't see a new move until move 13, Praggnanandhaa's 13th move. So some fairly standard developing moves in this early going. We don't have to budge just yet with the knight. Knight c3 you could play straight away, or the move in the game, d4. Not a huge difference between these two. Something I can say, a reason why d4 may be, let's say, more precise, is that black has one less option in response to this threat. Bishop b6, not an option. Black's reply here is with bishop a7. If you take the knight, this would not be a good piece exchange for black, giving up the bishop like that. So it falls back to a7, and only now does the knight retreat. Knight d7, queen c2, nice developing move, has an eye on e4 before black could maybe even think about establishing an alpha 0 pawn. It's going to require a bit more work, a bit more support before e4 is there. And with bishop d2, I mean, we might as well already say Praggnanandhaa has his eye on queenside castles. We do see just that. Kingside castles, queenside castles, game on. A race position ahead. We're going to see a lot of pawns launched at one another's king. So support for e4, h3, e4 hits, and here's the new move. We have knight h2. Has its eye on a jump to g4, or maybe the idea of g4, g5, and then tucking that knight right behind the pawn. Black's reply here is play in the center, d5. And from here, Pragg gets right on with the g-pawn advance, g4, g5 right around the corner. Now, how the computer wants to play it, it says first take on d5. Let me point out that after the move in the game, g4, what do you do about this idea of g5? Like, where's the knight going to go after g5 is in there? You really can't hold it up. You'd be asking for trouble. h4, and then g5 is cracking open a file. Don't want to really touch any of the pawns here, playing as black. By playing g4 at this moment, this gives black an opportunity to vacate the d5 square for the knight. So black's response to g4 is to take on c4, and then after the move in the game g5, the knight can react in the forward. Now, how the computer wants to play it after d5, it says first, take on d5. And now, this pawn doesn't have the option to get out of the way of the knight. Black doesn't have the option to vacate d5. At this moment, it wants to now go in for g4, g5 idea. Now, I want to point out, it may feel risky to play in this way as white, to take on d5. I mean, what's happening? We're trading c pawns, and we're opening up a line straight towards our king. At the same time, without that c6 pawn, b5 is a hole. So this is a positive for white. It has natural defense over that weakened square. It won't be so easy to, let's say, try and pry open the b file, the knight file, to get at the king. It's the trade-off. Now, if this was the position, if Praggnanandhaa first captured on d5 and only then played g4, what would be black's response here? I want to give you a feel for what the computer, at least, has its eye on. It's suggesting rook e6, and then after the knight is kicked, knight e8. This is actually a pawn sacrifice line. d5 would be up for grabs from there. And if you're not a fan of giving up a pawn, This is another option, but I must admit it's not really so appealing. Look at these knights interfering with the bishops. This knight actually interfering with the bishop and to a certain extent the rook. It has its eye here on f4, takes en passant, the knight getting back into business. All right, not a direction we go here. In this one, we have an immediate d5 with an immediate g4. Black takes on c4 and is now on the spot to meet the move in the game with knight d5. Knight takes e4, pressure on the knight, got to find a new home, g3 it is. Here we go with the pawn play. b5, knight f5 here, very invasive knight. Next up, h4, h5, g6, maybe h6, leaning more towards g6. That will crack open a file. An h6 move eventually can be shut down with g6. But first things first, where are we going with the queen here? This is considered a winning position for black. The move in the game is queen to e6. Computers doesn't consider that top. Top move is queen to f8. Now on the surface, it feels like the queen is just functioning like a bishop. The point behind queen to f8, a point, is that she keeps a watchful eye over this a6, or excuse me, a3 pawn. The queen from f8, we might say, helps facilitate queenside pawn breaks. c3, b4. This hits really fast. So, for instance, if white followed this queen f8 move with pawn play, this move is already there. Engaging with white. You take with the b pawn, that's a problem. That's one way black could continue. And another detail is if you meet c3 with bishop takes pawn, look at how quick this is hitting. Black is simply there first in this race position. What do you do now? If you back the bishop off, black is on this point twice. And if you take, clearly not appealing. Black is gifted a file here. And here's just a sample of how quickly things could go south here for white. You back off with the bishop, there's already a tactic with bishop takes d4. Follow up rook a1, you have to give up the queen. So the queen, we might say, is purposeful on this f8 square. She takes a step up, and Praggnanandhaa continues with h4. This queen post will soon be questioned. In comes c5, bishop h3, knight h6 right around the corner with check, winning the queen. She's got to find a new square. a6 it is. h5, b5, both sides with a pawn duo in one another's camp. Super invasive pawns. From here, Pragg runs in reverse. He has his eye now on c4. He plays, he underdevelops here. He's going after the c4 pawn and in a way holds up this c3 pawn break. If white tries something else, let's say white here ignores this capture or push and carries on with a push of his own, g6. It's very easy to maybe go wrong here as black. So a top continuation in the event of g6 would be to chop away and end up with double isolated g pawns. So just showing you what this looks like. This is considered top play here for black. Not ideal in general to have these double isolated pawns, but they will serve a useful role in securing the black king position well enough. Black's attack will be there first. Now, what's important to note is that if g6 is played here and you ignore this tension and carry on with your own play. For instance, a chop on a3 or a c3 push, you would already be losing. So let's test this response out, c3. It seems like it's the most forceful move. White would have a winning shot here with the following move. Really nice shot. Knight h6 would be winning. What are black's options here? Couple king moves or capture the knight. Let's touch on each briefly. The king goes to h8. This pawn is tracked down. This pawn is tracked down. This is considered a winning position. It's looking at a capture on c3 at this point, now that the king is at least exposed. There's a restriction on the rook. Follow up knight f3 moves. It's well worth the piece investment to have this king lured out here in the center with still all of this traffic present. A different decision here for the king in response to knight h6 check. If he goes to f8, there's pawn takes. And now how do you stop this pawn from promoting? Queen takes knight, king here to allow the rook to defend h8. Problems in each case for black. Note this capture here, it says you could take with the rook or even the king. Let's just say black is there to stop the passed pawn. White has these moves here, knight g4, and then bishop g2. And next up, white's ready to go promote the pawn. One final note here is if the king in this position goes to e7, there's a cute move in knight g8 check. And next up, white will be promoting the pawn. If you accept this sacrifice, what would follow is pawn takes pawn, queen takes pawn, and we don't really have to go much further. This attack is clearly there first for Team White. It's saying king f6, activate the rook. It's reading a mate in 8 from here. All right. In this game, we do not see g6. It's the underdeveloping bishop to f1, hunting for the c pawn. We see just that, down for the count. Black's response here is b3. Best in the computer's eyes, it says move the queen, defend the knight. Second best, though, the move in the game, b3. In fact, these next 4 moves by black seizes the initiative, giving great direction to white. Black is there first. He leaves his queen up for grabs for 4 consecutive moves. b3 in this game. Queen takes b3 is played. If you take the queen instead, black comes out ahead. There's a problem here and there. Black will soon win material. So we have queen takes b3. Still no queen move. It's knight c5. From here, queen a2 is played. If you take the queen, black is coming out ahead here, taking on b3 with check. You can take this knight with check. And at this position here, even though the queens are off the board, this king on b3, super vulnerable. These plenty of material for black here to cause the white king a headache. And also, position like this with things opening up, this knight does not at all stand well on h2. All right, in this game, we do not see this bishop takes queen after knight c5. The queen hides on a2. Going to c2 will run into d3. Let's just put that on briefly. That's really, really ugly. Now the queen is going to be kicked away from the bishop. Bishop takes, similarly, previous line, there's going to be a problem here and here. Black will win out. So the queen has to tuck herself away here on a2, really just function like a bishop for a little bit. Follow up now, knight d3 check, king b1, and now follow up bishop takes knight. Finally, the queen is captured, and black will track this queen in just a few moves. Knight 3 to b4 check. And from here, king a1 is played. Just a couple seconds spent on this move. He doesn't have a whole lot of time. 10 minutes and change here for Praggnanandhaa. Best in the computer's eyes, my goodness, if you're playing this move, well done. It's saying pitch this e4 pawn. And in playing in this way, not only are you pitching a pawn, but you're pretty much saying you're okay giving up in the end the exchange. Now, what's the assessment in this position? If, let's say, some natural looking move, rook a to b8 is played, bishop d3, there's some stability for the pieces, it would be reading around minus 0.6. It says best from here is to pitch this pawn. It's reading around minus 1.3. All right, that would be a really difficult move to pull off here. Playing e4 at this stage. We have the more human king to a1, queen tracked down, and now e3 is broken down. F takes e3, and from here we have knight takes e3. Best is this pretty neat continuation. Bishop e4, and should the rook move, say to f1, Black has a cool counter, or a cool double attack, I should say. Bishop b8, this short move, has a nice long distance attack, and this bishop is hit as well. Bishop and knight under fire. Black is winning out here. Ideas of counter punches like bishop b7 or bishop to b5 targeting the black rooks can both be met with bishop takes knight. And black is winning out with the two minor pieces versus rook exchange. All right, we do not see bishop e4. It is instead knight takes e3, rook c1. This is around a -1 evaluation here. And right about here, critical moment for white. There's a mate threat now on b2. Where do you go with the b pawn? 1 or 2 steps. Pragg goes 1 step. That is correct. If you go 2 steps, there would be a really neat follow-up here for black. One continuation here that really highlights the strength of these minor pieces that are swarming the white king, really. If you play b4 in this position, rook e2 would be a star move. Ready to move the knight? Discovered check. The point is that if the rook is picked off, these 3 pieces will weave a mate. Bishop c4, we just chop. The main point in the end is that after the king moves, this here is ball game. Bishop has these 3, the knight, the other 2. Fancy sequence here. Praggnanandhaa, well aware of that detail, he takes 1 step. This pawn provides some security for the king along this diagonal. Follow up from here, rook e to c8. Black, in a way, with this move is taking his foot off the gas. It does pack a punch. There is a threat here to take the bishop. What the computer is leaning towards says best here is to put pressure on the bishop. And in this situation, white has to be extremely careful. If you move the bishop, you're going to run into check and then checkmate on a1. Best at this stage would be to improve the knight and have this idea to give up the exchange like so and play this knight and pawn versus rook imbalance. All right, it's reading around -1.3. You really see this one still going in any direction with these 2 connected passed pawns. They're set back a bit, but one imprecise move maybe by black and tables can easily turn, with an imbalance like this. All right, not the direction we go. Black here does not play rook to a8. It is rook c8, follow up now, rook h to f1. If something else is played, let's say the knight improves here, we could see rook takes bishop. And you can't take back because there's a mate here. So white has to be in a position to meet this move here with rook takes bishop. How does play follow from here? We have knight e3, in exchange sacrifice. White has an unopposed bishop. There is a pin on the f-pawn. White pinpoints that. Chop, chop, knight d6, pawn takes, and from here king f8 is played. If knight takes f7 going into a pin, trying to pile up on that pinned piece would be a losing move. A fine move here for white would be to maybe push your passed pawn, play with a4, put the bishop on a different square. If you play rook f1 here, that runs into rook captures bishop. And even though after the recapture rook b2 would not be mate in that situation, it would set up a rook takes knight, discovered check. Black would be winning out there. So black's response to this move, he simply hides behind the passed pawn, doesn't work himself into a pin. Speaking of pins, we got a pin right here. Black at this point gives back the exchange. Rook takes bishop, pawn takes rook, and from here knight b5. No dark square bishop for white. Immediately vulnerable now on these dark squares. Black takes advantage of the pin on the c file. Can't take. From here we have king b1, knight a3 check, king a2, knight c2. White's response here is king b1. This knight is poison. Rook takes knight will run into check and checkmate. The king needs that c2 square to be open. So we have a poison knight here. King b1 is the play. Follow up knight a3 check. We end up repeating in this game. Why doesn't this knight swipe the b pawn? Well, first of all, it's not really a full pawn. It's a half dead pawn, one of the double isolated pawns. White would actually be winning this position. Knight f3 would be a winning way if black was hunting that b4 pawn. There's a way white could lose, keep in mind. These pieces are taking away currently all of white's squares here. If the knight for some reason went to this g4 square, this is already winning for black. Not a great way to stop this rook a1 idea. White would be winning in this position if black hunted the b4 pawn. If knight f3 is played, this is winning for white. Targeting the bishop. Bishop backs off. Another only move here for white would be rook h1, ready to land a skewer. And if g6 is played covering that square, another only move here that's winning, knight g5, ready to pounce here, promote next with check, maybe knight here with check in some cases. The point, if the knight is picked up, the bishop is no longer there, preventing that skewer. All right, black knows that trying to track down this half-dead pawn wouldn't really be a good idea. It's best at this point to simply repeat, and that's exactly what we have, a threefold repetition in this one. This was an excellent fighting draw out of this English opening Kramnik-Shirov counterattack. Case of opposite sides castles. Excellent pawn play in this one. Anyhow, what are your thoughts on this one? Feel free as usual to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.